what's up? Welcome back to another Planty video. My name is Shannon and this is Planted 386. If it's your first time, thank you so much for clicking. I understand that there is a plethora of planty content out on the internet for you to enjoy, so anytime someone decides to spend a little of their time with me, I'm always super appreciative. And if you're returning, thank you so much for being here. I say it in every video and I'll continue to say it in every video. I appreciate you more than you know. Your likes, subscribes, your shares, all the things. I could not be more grateful that you spend time with me week after week. Normally in the planty corner, we are in the spare room again today. I am working on getting this set up as a sort of backup space for us to hang out. I have the grow tent over here that you can probably see a little bit of. And yeah, the reason we're in here today is because I thought it would be a better backdrop for the wish list plants that we're going to talk about as I flash them up on the screen for you. So if that sounds good for you, I hope you will stick around until the end of the video. Thank you so much for being here. Let's get into it. Okay, so before we get into the wish list plans, I do want to talk about my goals for 2025, my planty goals. I didn't feel like there was enough of them to warrant an entire separate video, so I thought that it would be a great way to segue into the wish list plans would be to just share what I have in mind for 2025. And yeah, so let's get into it. My first one is to curate my collection or continue to curate my collection. I would say that I started doing this last year. I just kind of realized that I had too much. So in 2023, I really went ham on buying plants. Like I pretty much just bought anything that spoke to me. And while I learned a lot from that experience, I also learned that it became too much. It became overwhelming. And I found that there's certain genus of plants that don't get along with me, that I just can't seem to grow well. And I found it to be rather stressful. I don't like to see things suffer. So I know, for example, that alocasias, begonias, I don't seem to grow them well. And so rather than continuing to buy it because it's beautiful and I want that plant, it's more of a collector's mindset, sort of, just, you know, you got to catch them all. And I've just been trying to curate my collection over this past year. And so I'm hoping to continue on that path in 2025 and really just adding things in that really bring me joy, that I really want to see every single day. And so that kind of leads me into buying less and trading more. I host plant swaps every month, and that's usually when I will trade plants. But outside of that, I really haven't done a ton of trading, and I'm really intrigued by the whole concept. I feel like when you take something in from someone else's collection, you're sort of also obtaining a piece of them, and there is a certain sentiment behind that. And so I think that's really special, and that's something that I would like to dabble in over this next year. I would also like to start hybridizing my anthuriums because they are now reaching maturity, and I'm really excited about that. I have been growing them, I would say, since October 2023. And so they've really had all of last year to size up and mature, and they're now putting out flowers and their leaves are big and beautiful, and I just feel like they're ready to take on that role. So yeah, I have never really propagated a ton in terms of anthuriums just because I've been hoping to breed them, and I think we're at that place. So over this year, I would like to start creating some amazing hybrids from the anthuriums that I have. I would like to continue experimenting, especially in the garden. So last year, John and I started a spring garden, and it was awesome. We had an amazing time. I learned so much from that experience. Some of these plants I had never even, like for example, cucumber. I had no idea what a cucumber plant even looked like until growing them, and it was so fun. Something I need to get better at is pest management outside, because here in Florida we have all the bugs, y'all, all the bugs. And so it just felt like a constant battle. Although we did have a lot of success, I feel like there's definitely a ton still to learn. And so I still need to be researching and doing all the things to hopefully establish a better crop this year. Creating a space outside for my overgrown tropicals. So I have several plants now that are really just outgrowing the space inside. I only have so much room in here. My space is our planty corner that we hang out in each week, and it's a very small space. I do have this room here that we're in now that has the grow tent, and I do plan on utilizing that to a certain degree, but yeah, there's just certain plants that I either don't want in the house anymore or have overgrown the space. And so I do have a nice little shaded area out back, and I'm thinking about creating like a little tropical oasis and just putting some of these plants outside. I'm also interested in seeing how these plants grow in a more natural habitat, you know, just fighting the elements and really thriving in the humidity outside here in Florida. So that's something I would like to do this year. Continuing to build my planty community here on YouTube. I absolutely adore it here. I have loved filming every week and bringing content to the channel, and meeting so many of you through this channel has been incredible. Just the whole social aspect of it. I've really enjoyed being able to talk plants. And yeah, I would just like to see where 2025 takes us in terms of building this community here. Continuing to learn recipes that will utilize what we produce in the garden. So last year we had, for example, we had a plethora of tomatoes, like cherry tomatoes specifically. The plant turned into like a huge bush, and it was just constantly producing. And I found myself a little bit overwhelmed with what to do with some of these tomatoes. So I would just like to learn some recipes that are going to help utilize some of the things that we produce this year. And then last but not least is learning how to can and jar properly, how to properly store the food that we make. And yeah, I've never experimented with jarring or canning before, and so that's just something that I would like to research and get into a little bit more over this coming year. So that's pretty much it, you guys. I don't have a ton of goals. I'm pretty happy with where my collection is at this time. I would like to potentially add some of my wish list plants over this next coming year, but it's okay if they just remain on the list, and when I get them is when I get them. I have dialed back on buying quite a bit. I started that last year. I did buy several plants over this past year, but I just know that there is only so much space in this house, and I have only so much time in the day to care for all of these plants. And so I feel like when you have a collector's mentality, there is a certain, how can I say, a certain desire to see something and just want it without really thinking it through. And that's something that I'm really trying to be better about. These are living things, so it's not like you can just put it on a shelf and forget about it. I've also learned that by adding plants that I see to my wish list, and we'll get into this in a minute, there's going to be moments where I look back on that plant and say, maybe that's not for me anymore. So I think it's better to sort of add it to a list, sit on it for a week or two, perhaps, and really decide if that's something you really want, or if it's just something you saw in the moment and there was that sort of impulsive desire, if I'm making sense. But yeah, let's get into the fun part now. All right, you guys, let's get into these wish list plants. So I have them on my phone. I'm gonna pull up the album. Hopefully this all goes well for us, because I've never done this before. The first one is one that I found through Claire from the Jungle Haven, which I'm sure you guys all know of Claire. She's amazing. We love Claire. But it's Monstera dubia. She has a beautiful Monstera dubia in her collection. It is striking. However, this kind of goes back to curating my collection and being realistic with what's going to actually grow in my space. And while I think this is such a beautiful plant, I also love that it's very different in its juvenile form to its mature form. So here we're looking at the juvenile form, and I mean, overall, it's so beautiful. The veination, if you've been around, you know I love a good silver striking sort of lightning veination on plants. I just think that is beautiful. But it is one that's going to require quite a bit of maintenance. So you're definitely going to have to do moss pole extensions. It's got to be on a pole or a board or something that's going to enable it to climb. And so in hindsight, like I added this to my wish list. This is the first one. So a long time ago, it's been on here. And I just kind of feel like while I love it, it's not necessarily realistic for my space. So looking at it in its mature form, I mean, these fenestrations, they're absolutely incredible. I love the elongated leaf. If it's something that I found in a trade or for like a super affordable price, I have seen them here at local, growers for relatively affordable. It might be something I'd be interested in, perhaps growing outside in my little tropical oasis, but definitely not inside, even though it is so beautiful. It really is, like, beautiful. Monsteras are majestic. They tend to grow crazy, though. Like, they grow out of control. So you definitely have to have a space for it, dedicated to its growth and its maturity. And so, yeah, that being said, it would definitely have to be something that I grew outside. Next is Philodendron El Chaco Red, or Philodendron rubrijuvenile. I've had this on my wish list for a long time, and in fact, I did have one. I want to say it was a tissue culture. Not that I have anything against tissue culture, but the way that this one grew wasn't typical to like a philodendron that I have had in the past. It ended up being a little bit more bushy, and I found that anytime it would put out a leaf, it would, I don't know, it would sort of like almost choke itself out. It also was a spider mite magnet, you guys. I do love the fact that the leaves are velvety on this plant, and of course the red back is really what it's known for. But I feel like there are some anthuriums on my list that could definitely scratch this itch, and I'm finding myself a little less interested in philodendrons as my planty journey has gone on, just mostly due to the amount of work that they require. I'm very selective on like which plants I choose to put on poles just because of the maintenance that comes with it. So while it is so beautiful, I think this is one that I would have to pass on, at least for now. Next is Aglaonema Manila's Pride. This is definitely one I'm still interested in for sure, but it's one that still hasn't come down in price. It's very pricey. Actually, this one here is going for $150. It's stunning. I mean, it's really beautiful, right? I think Blue Moon had one not so long ago, and I thought, wow, so beautiful. But again, I'm not sure how often I'm going to be spending this kind of money on plants anymore. There's just things in my life that have to take priority. And as I'm looking to start my hair journey, my hair business, I have to be super, super selective when it comes to spending this kind of money on a plant. And while I think it's absolutely beautiful and it does seem to hold its value, it's something I'll have to continue to wait on. I do have an Aglaonema pictum tricolor that I absolutely adore. And so there's no doubt that I would adore this one also. Maybe perhaps if I could find a cutting or just like a small little plantlet of it at a more affordable price than $150, perhaps. But yeah, for now I'll just have to ogle her from afar. Do you guys, does anybody out there have this plant? I would be curious to know. And I would also be curious to know how your experience has been growing it. Next is definitely one that's obtainable, one that I'm definitely interested in. This is Hoya latifolia sarawak, another one that I found off of Claire. And really there's not a lot to say about this Hoya. It's pretty simplistic, but what's got me is how massive these leaves can get. They can grow to be the size of a dinner plate, massive. And I don't currently have anything like that in my collection. I do have Hoya Queen Quinervia, which does give me similar leaves and large leaves, but nothing like how big this one gets. And so for sure, this is one that I've seen all over Palm Street. It's definitely obtainable, and I know it's not like much to look at, but I think just the growth journey of this one is very interesting to me. Being able to watch the leaves expand, and yeah, I love that about a Hoya. Same reason I really love anthuriums is the leaves starting out so small and expanding. I just find that whole process fascinating. So this is definitely one that I'm super interested in. Okay, so next on my list is Philodendron Rio. Now, when I look at this, I do think this is such a beautiful plant. I love the variegation, and I think it would be absolutely incredible trailing. But something I've learned in my journey, my planty journey, is I'm not as interested in trailing phyllos and like pothos as much as I thought I would be. I still have a few in my collection. I feel like this is very similar to my philodendron silver stripe, which I think I paid 20 bucks for, perhaps like, I don't know, 8 or 9 months ago. And I feel like that one scratches the itch for me when it comes to this one. Now, if it's one that I could find through a trade or a swap, something like that, I would be all over it. I would find a space for it, perhaps in the pergola or something like that. This is one that I would be very interested in putting on a board and watching it climb, watching the leaves sort of expand, just kind of experimenting with that. But like this is still going for 70 bucks off of, looks like Gabriella plants. And yeah, I think I'm overpaying that kind of money for a trailing phyllo. That's just me personally. That's just kind of how I feel about it. But yeah, I mean, it is beautiful. It's striking in all the right ways. But I feel like my Marble Queen and my Silver Stripe sort of scratches the itch for me, and I'm happy with both of those. Next is very unrealistic, you guys. Like, I've had this on my wish list for a long time, since I started my planty journey. This is Philodendron ilsamanii, and I mean, it is just absolutely stunning. I do want to say really quickly, any of these photos that you see from like Etsy or just Google, none of these are my photos, obviously. But I also don't have any experience with these growers, so I just want to make that clear. I've never purchased from any of these. I've heard good things about Christina's garden. She does carry a lot of really exotic, expensive plants, but I've never personally purchased from her. Anyways, getting back to the plant, I love that this has the sort of white and green veination along with the green on green veination. Variegation. I think it is absolutely beautiful. I have learned in my journey that phyllos in general, I'm just choosing to be very selective over the ones that I'm bringing in. They require a lot of maintenance. They require poles. Most of them need to climb. And I feel like I've learned that there's certain genus plants that I really gravitate to. And while I appreciate philodendrons, they're not like on the top tier for me anymore. I'm finding myself sort of parting ways with a lot of them. I'm finding myself putting some of them outside or desiring to put them outside. So yeah, while this is absolutely striking, I do think if you are in the plant business and you are a seller, this is perhaps a good investment plant because they don't seem to come down in price. But I also feel like it's probably only a matter of time before these do hit TC, and you know, $950 for a plant is like absolutely out of my league. It's just not something I would ever be able to acquire at that price. And so yeah, I can appreciate it from afar. I just think it is a beautiful plant. And I will say, I do have a Philodendron Jose Bueno that I do plan on chopping soon in the spring. It has grown immensely, and I plan on sort of putting it in my tropical oasis. And I feel like it scratches the itch for me. I love my philodendron Jose Bueno. It's one of my favorites, and I feel like it's pretty similar to this. It's pretty similar. It does fade down to all green. That's kind of, it's a perk for the plant, but a downside if you're into variegated plants. But the variegation on a Jose Bueno sticks around for a long time before it fades down. And I feel like I'm totally happy with that. Okay, now we're going to get into some anthuriums, and this is definitely one that's on my radar. This is Anthurium red crystallinum, cross luxurians, and yeah, I look at this and I just think, wow, just wow. I do love my Lux, and I do feel like this is pretty similar to my Lux. Like, if I never acquired this, I could be happy with my luxurians, but this one is definitely darker than my Lux, which I appreciate, and I do love that sort of tinge of red here and there on the plant. I just think it is so beautiful. Look at the sinus, like it is striking. I love the texture of a Lux. I totally get the hype and why they make such great parent plants. This is one I'd be interested in for breeding purposes, I feel like, more so than just like adding it to my collection. So yeah, I think it's beautiful. Okay, now we're getting into my number one wish list plant. I think I will rate these down below in the description box, one being the most wanted and going on. But yeah, this is definitely one that I hope to acquire this year. It would be a dream to acquire this year. I have wanted this since the first time I laid eyes on it, and that is Anthurium Delta Force. These were super difficult to acquire back when I first came across it. Now I'm seeing them on Rare Plant Fairy for, I think, $150 for a little seedling, which is still a lot of money. But if I were to pay that kind of coin for a plant, it would be this one. It would definitely, there's three that I would pay that kind of money for. And by the way, $150 is my absolute max on a plant. It's the most I've ever paid for a plant. It's the most I'll ever pay for a plant, which is a lot of money, at least for me. And gosh, this is everything I could ever dream of a perfect plant being. I mean, the ruffliness of the edges of the leaf, the striking veination, it's just perfection. I feel like there is no plant out there more beautiful than this one. And I know that's just my personal opinion, but shout out to Danya Castro. She has some amazing plants, and I would love to tour her space. But this is it for me, you guys. Like, if I only were able to acquire one plant this year off of this list, it would be this one. It is everything. I would make it front and center focal point in the planty corner. It looks like a butterfly to me. Like it's just beautiful. It's just beautiful. I could look at this all day. Okay, next is Anthurium Bevep crossed Antilachii. Again, this is something very different than anything else that I have in my collection. And for me, it's really the sinus here and the overall color of the leaf. I love this rich dark green. I don't have any anthuriums outside of my Pappy that are really this dark, and it's definitely something that intrigues me about it, and I would like to see a little bit more of in my collection. So this is definitely striking. Shout out to my girl Planted in Platinum, who also liked this photo. We love Natasha from Planted in Platinum. If you've not checked out her channel, check her out. She's incredible. Yeah, this guy is beautiful. Totally beautiful. Next, Anthurium King of Spades, similarly to Delta Force with the veination of this plant. It's just chef's kiss. Like anytime I see this lightning variegation, I'm drawn to it like a moth to a flame. It is just absolutely striking. again, I could look at this all day. I'll probably say that over and over again. But what's different here is the shape of the leaf. It gives me sort of like crystallinum vibes, but I feel like the lobes are a little more pronounced on the King of Spades. And I feel like the overall leaf is rounder, and that's something I definitely appreciate. I've heard that these are rather tricky to grow, so that's kind of a little scary to me, especially if you're paying this kind of money for a plant like this. But I mean, I heard things like that about my Queen Anthurium, and she's been nothing but a joy, which I did recently chop her entirely, and I'm hoping that that works out in my favor. It's the first time I've ever propagated an anthurium. Y'all pray. Anyways, she's beautiful. Danya's beautiful. I would love to have this plant. Next is Anthurium Red Dark Phoenix. It's kind of similar to the BVEP that I just showed you, and if I had to choose between the two, I would choose this one over the other one. I love the sinus here, and I love those veins, like the shade of green, the red. I have a thing with red and green plants. I don't know what that is. I just love it. This girl is beautiful. I also have a thing for these like bunny-like lobes on anthuriums. I don't know what that is. It's just a trait that I absolutely adore, and I don't know, you guys, this is just like giving me all the feelings. Beautiful. All right, next, Anthurium Ace of Spades. So when I look at this one, it's been on my wish list for a while, and if I were to acquire this, I would view this for more of breeding purposes than just obtaining it for my collection. It's a beautiful plant. I love how dark it is. For me, it's this veination. However, I do have a hybrid of Ace of Spades in my collection. It's one of my favorite anthuriums. I've shown her a ton on the channel. I just feel like I kind of like my hybrid over this one. It's got similar veination, but there's a little bit more color to it. And yeah, I think I prefer her over this one. It is beautiful, but these are still going for a lot of money. And yeah, I think I'm kind of happy with my little hybrid. So don't get me wrong. If one came my way, I wouldn't be mad about it. It's just not one that's like top tier on my list. Same thing with this one here. Anthurium Eastern Dressleri, beautiful, stunning plant. I love the edges and how they sort of have that little bit of a red cast. I love the shade of green. I love the simplicity of this anthurium, if I'm being honest. It's very different than most of mine in my collection and the ones on my wish list, but again, if I were to acquire this, it would be for breeding purposes, and while I think it's beautiful, I just feel like I have others that I like more. And yeah, I do see that Florida Beauty though in the background, and Chef's Kiss. If you don't have a Florida Beauty, I highly recommend. It's one of my most favorite plants, and yeah, I think you should get one. All right, next is another one that was shown to me through Claire, and this is Rhaphidophora foraminifera. That is a mouthful. It's another one that's very different in its juvenile phase to its mature phase, which I will say that is a trait that draws me in to some of these plants. I think that is so interesting how it can start off looking like one thing and end up looking totally different. I have seen variegated versions of this going around. They're very pricey. This one is obtainable. This one I've seen around for pretty affordable pricing. But again, similar to the dubia, I would have to have a dedicated space for it. It's definitely one that's going to require a pole, and I'm just not sure that I'm interested in that journey. But this is the juvenile phase, and there's really not much to look at here. It's just very simplistic. Kind of reminds me of like my Spiritus Sancti when I got it originally as a baby. But it's when it reaches maturity that it just becomes a total show. Total showstopper. If I had to choose between this and the dubia, I would choose this one because this is different, very different than anything that I have. And there is something that really draws me in when it comes to the fenestrations being just down that middle vein. I think that looks so delicate, and really Mother Nature is so fascinating, so beautiful. This is such a striking plant. Again, it's just a matter of space for me, but I'm curious if you have this, let me know. Has it reached maturity? Do you have those little beautiful fenestrations? It's beautiful. Okay, now we're coming into some Hoyas, you guys, and I feel like for the most part, most of these Hoyas are going to be pretty obtainable for me in the future. So the first one is Hoya quadrata silver, and really it's the foliage for me. When I'm buying Hoyas or looking at Hoyas, it's always the foliage. I've never had a Hoya bloom for me, so it's kind of pointless for me to look at the flower and buy the plant for the flower. It's like, if it blooms, it's a perk, but I am very drawn to Hoya foliage. The shape of the leaves, I love how waxy some of them are. I love how fuzzy some of them can be. I love how rigid and prehistoric some of them can look, and how delicate and graceful some of them look. I just feel like it's a genus that offers so much variety, and really for me, it's the silver splotching on these leaves. It's kind of similar to the one that I'm about to show you. But yeah, I think it's stunning. I mean, and I've seen these all over Palm Street, so I know that they're out there. I know that I can acquire one, which is also a perk. I enjoy finding plants that are obtainable versus something like Ilsamanii that's just going to wind up on the list and stay there because it's so inobtainable. But yeah, so that's her. And then the next one I have is Hoya undulata. So again, very similar. If I had to choose between the two, I think I would choose this one, mainly because the leaves are a bit darker and I feel like the silver splotchiness shows up a bit. As I was saying before my camera so rudely interrupted me, I do feel like the splotchiness of the leaves shows up better on this particular Hoya versus the quadrata, but I wouldn't mind having both. They do seem to be ones that prefer being on a trellis, which if you've been around, you know I prefer my Hoyas to just grow as they wish, but I would definitely make an exception for these two. Actually, I think there's 3 on my list, and I love the crinkliness of this leaf. If you look at there's like a little side profile shot of one of these leaves, and you can really see how crinkly it is, and I think that is just chef's kiss. Beautiful. Next is Hoya Eves Rocherii. Again, this one is striking. It's very different to anything else that I have in my collection, and I love this whole setup, like everything about it. The trellis that it's on, the pot that it's in, and I love the little clips, the little butterfly clips. I think that adds such a whimsical charm. This is really goals for me, and I just think there's something so delicate about this Hoya. I don't know, I love these sort of long, strappy leaves. I think they're beautiful. I think it's very whimsical and charming. Yeah, it's definitely one on my list, for sure. Okay, next is another anthurium. This is Anthurium nigrolaminum Gigi, and this has been on my list for a while. This is another one I feel like is pretty obtainable for me. I've seen them at Equigenera, I've seen them on Palm Street, but for me, it's the leaf shape, you guys. I know there's not a lot going on in terms of venation, and that's perfectly fine. The way that this leaf is shaped, it gives me kind of like alocasia vibes, and because I can't grow alocasia, I feel like it sort of scratches that itch a bit for me. I love those super pronounced lobes. I do have one in my collection that I got recently from the Green Escape. It's Anthurium clarinervium crossed with Bintang kajori. That kind of gives off this vibe in its mature form, but I think this would make an excellent parent plant. I love the texture of the leaves. The emergent leaves are also really beautiful on this Anthurium, and it's definitely one that I would love to have. Next, Anthurium Michelle by Doc Block. I cannot describe to you guys how much I want this Anthurium. I would say this is number 3 for me in terms of like ranking. I missed out on the Home Depot thing. I don't know, I kind of feel like I'd rather get it from a private grower anyways, but it's really everything about this Anthurium. I mean, everything about it. The venation, that red that red line, the little red sinus. Like, you guys, this is so beautiful. I want one so bad. I love to see that they've come down in price. That makes me excited because that makes me feel like it's a little more obtainable for me. And who knows what this year has to offer. I would love to have one. I would love to breed with it. What a striking plant. So beautiful. Okay, next is Anthurium tazula red crystallinum. I found this one off of the NSC Tropicals website. I think these are going for $175 as a seedling. Again, that's a little bit out of my price range. While I would love to have this, I feel like I would love to see them come down just a little bit more in price. But man, what a showstopper. I would say this is number 2 for me on my list. Is something about these emergent leaves. It's just beautiful. It's beautiful. I know Doc Block, Michelle, Zara, these all look sort of similar to a degree, but I think it's worth having all 3 or 4. I think they are different enough from one another to warrant having them in my collection, and it's going to remain on the list until I acquire it. I just think it's stunning. Next is one that I haven't really seen a ton of. I stumbled across this. This is Anthurium macrolobium. Very, very different than anything else that I have. It does sort of remind me of my Anthurium titanium crossed fingers. Does give me that vibe a little bit, but I would like to have it in its own form, just this specific plant. Specifically for breeding purposes, because I feel like this could make some really interesting hybrids. But yeah, I also have this thing for these sort of butterfly leaves. I just think they're so beautiful. I've not really heard many people talk about this Anthurium. I don't really know much about it. I don't know if it's rare, if it's not so rare. It's one that I need to do a little bit more research on, but I stumbled across it, thought it was beautiful, and added it to my list. And it's definitely one I would love to have. Another one from NSC Tropicals off their website. This is the Anthurium Fairchild. I believe this is a crystallinum, but it's specific to Fairchild Tropical Gardens, and it's just beautiful. Again, it's kind of giving that Delta Force vibe, but a little less pillowy, or roughly, I should say. I would love to own this plant. I think these seedlings are going for $195 on the website. Again, a little bit out of my price range, but stunning. I also feel like this is one that would be a potentially good prospect for breeding and just for possibly selfing, because these don't seem to come down in price. I have been eyeing this plant for a long time, and it's always been in that sort of 200 and up range. It's come down a little bit, but not a ton, so it seems to hold its value. Again, it's sort of a collector's piece. It's beautiful. I love it. Is this my last one? The last one, you guys. We've reached the last one. So this is Anthurium longifolia shepherdii. Similar to Eves rocherii, this one's definitely much more affordable than Eves rocherii. At least I believe so. I think I've definitely seen both on Palm Street, but this one you can find on the Green Escape, which I have ordered through the Green Escape before, and I've always had good luck with Green Escape. This is one I think is totally obtainable for me. If I had to choose between the two, I feel like I prefer the Eves rocherii. I feel like there's just a little bit more of a delicate quality to that one, but they are very similar. I mean, this one could definitely scratch the itch, but it's not one that I'm willing to have two of the same. Like, I feel like these are too similar to have both, so it's kind of like one or the other, and I feel like I gravitate towards the other over this one. But it is beautiful. The flowers are beautiful, and yeah, I think she's gorgeous. I love this on a trellis. Like, I love these leaves, these Hoya leaves on a trellis. I hope I'm making sense. Some I like on trellises and some I definitely don't. In fact, I prefer, like I said, Hoyas to just kind of grow as they are. But Yeah, with that being said, you guys, we've reached the end of my wish list. This girl's just kind of wanting to do her own thing. Okay. And I'm just curious to know, what's on your wish list? What do you have on there? What are your goals for 2025? Tell me down below. Let's have a chat about it. And yeah, we'll see you guys soon. Thanks for being here. Bye, guys.